So you could be walking in the forest and these things somehow work, apparently.
Yeah, well, I remember when I first met you, you walked really slow. And then after we became successful, you walked really fast. So you could either get these things or maybe just sell a company, I guess. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Our Future Podcast. My name is Michael Sakan, and I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Simran Sandhu. Simmy and I sold our media company to Morning Brew last year, and now we host this podcast where we talk about emerging business ideas, trends, industries that we think are exciting, products we think are exciting, to help imbue you with some inspiration for maybe opportunities that you're tackling yourself or things that you're looking at and thinking about starting. So, we're in this creative mode with you. We're thinking about what's next for us. So we like to keep this as a kind of an open brainstorm, open analysis for you guys to share in on. And we're grateful for you guys showing up every week. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you love watching our future podcast content. And feel free to leave us some feedback in the comments if you should do so. Today, we're talking about hardware, and it was all inspired. So consumer hardware, we talked a lot about software, a lot about marketing agencies, a lot about marketing tech, sales tech. We even covered like defense companies. I mean, there's an industry we haven't touched, but now we're taking a more strategic approach with these episodes to kind of laser in on a certain space. And shout out to Ritwik Pavan, who does a weekly roundup of consumer tech launches that are really futuristic and writes a little bit about them on Substack and on his Twitter. So shout out to him. We've covered him on the pod before. Simmy, you want to talk about Ritwik real quick? Because he's like a pretty cool young founder that some people may not have heard of if they haven't listened to the past episodes.
Yeah, I would love to. And I think that was well said. Ritwik's been a good friend of ours for a few years now. We met him in Austin, and he's a really talented founder. While he was in college, he had built an agency. I think he did a few $1 million in revenue when he was very young. That gave him the opportunity to go explore other ideas and stuff. But he was always fascinated with doing something really, really big. And so, his next company was this, compliance around curb space, and it allowed you to optimize parking space more broadly speaking. And the company was called Vade. Did that for a little while, ended up leaving, and then he started a company called Kraba. And this was around, this idea of, affordable housing is a struggle in the States that's only going to continue. So let's create these ADUs, which are these small units of sorts where people can live in. And they had a futuristic feel towards them. It was very tech enabled, and they were really optimizing every, square footage that they could. And he ended up selling that business to a strategic company in the space. And now he's at this company, I believe it's called Fragile, but it's really, really interesting. What they enable is the subscription layer behind hardware products. And so they have brought the SaaS model of reoccurring revenue to hardware. And out of that, he does this roundup on X that Michael was referencing, where he literally uses this as sort of a lead magnet and bring awareness of all the cool stuff happening in hardware, but most of it being consumer focused. And so there's one, product that I thought was really, really cool. So it is this thing called Moonwalkers. Did you see this on Ritwik's page by chance?
I did. Is this the you put them on your feet and you can walk faster? Do you know?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, do you know I was talking with this company when this was way back when. I think you were on. We were working together at the time. It was they wanted us to do a video on them on Our Future. The Stride company.
I had no clue about that.
Yeah.
It's super funny. It feels like Heelys. Like I looked at them, I was like,
yeah, exactly.
Created like a permanent version of Heelys. When you're in the airport and they have that little it's not an escalator, but it's like the thing that like this little ramp of sorts that you can walk on and it helps you go super faster. Imagine that, but for your shoes. So it's like this ongoing ramp that just helps you go twice as fast.
Rollerblades, like mechanized rollerblades.
Yeah, totally. The way to describe it is they called them mobility shoes. So they let you walk at the speed of a run, designed with an adaptive AI drivetrain for effortlessly mobility. and it features hands-free operations, speed charging, and it can handle every single terrain. So you could be walking in the forest and these things somehow work, apparently.
Yeah, well, I remember when I first met you, you walked really slow, and then after we became successful, you walked really fast. So you could either get these things or maybe just sell a company, I guess, just to get the motivation to get a pep in your step. I don't really know what happens with like other pedestrians here. Like I feel like there could be a lot of conflict on the sidewalk, but maybe there could be a future where there is a different, you could just be in the bike lane, or there's like a different lane for like, AI powered pedestrians in the future. That's just like kind of crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a really cool idea. Who doesn't want to get places faster and cut time, in between locations? Um,
Yeah, I think it's cool, right? So if you think about a lot of hardware, there's this mechanic of like robotics built into it, right? So I feel like all of the big companies in the past have been there was like this robot company that Amazon was trying to buy, and then they got hit with antitrust concerns, or a lot of them seem to be around like home-based automation. And that's been a super, super lucrative space, right? So like Ring was a company that sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. It feels like everyone is playing into these like the big robotics play right now is like one of those companies that Brett Adcock is starting, right? And I think it's called Figure, but that seems to be like these humanoid robots.
yeah,
So I feel like the big plays all have some kind of robotics component to it, but
yeah,
with these consumer products, they feel very viral in nature. Like you look at
yeah,
them and I'm like, this is a marketing first company, and just by seeing it you can see the value
yeah.
in them.
That's why they wanted to work with our future on some. I don't think they had any trouble finding PR though. I think that's why they didn't end up biting the bullet with us. But I think human augmentation is a good lens to look at things through, right? Like whether it's software people are building in the AI space, personal assistants, all this tech to make people more efficient. I think this is just a physical extension of that. So when we think about hardware products, I think empowering people, there was another company I saw that was doing like an exoskeleton that could help you walk faster and improve posture and things like that. So I think augmenting, the biology of humans is interesting instead of, full out replacing them with, doing tasks. So I think that's pretty cool. Another company that I saw that was pretty interesting is a tennis. So I'm a big sports fanatic. So, and I play a lot of tennis, pickleball, golf, but this product is it's made by a company called Nisplay. And it's a tennis ball machine that just like feeds you up to 80 tennis balls. You can adjust all of it via app. And the coolest thing about this product, I'll show all these products on the screen on the video, is it's very portable. So it's literally in the shape of a backpack, and it has straps that go around you. So whether you're on the subway or just trying to, you can put it up. It even fits in an airplane luggage compartment. And I think there's two interesting trends here, or kind of features. The first is portability, right? Like, how can you make a product that historically has never moved between location A to B something that can? And I think that's what they nailed, because typically the only place you're going to find a ball machine is at like a professional tennis facility. A lot of them are gas powered or battery powered. I mean, these things haven't been iterated upon in decades, right? And typically it just sits in the shed of some tennis instructor, right? So they're consumerizing something and democratizing it. So I think democratization and providing people the ability to purchase an asset that was previously a shared one, and that people always had kind of limited access to. And second is just like the portability angle. I think is just really, really interesting and smart for that, and enables people to play a game, without finding a partner, which is another challenge in tennis. Just being able to work on that game by yourself, I think is super, super cool.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And if you add in the personalization element, I think that is also really key to building a really successful hardware product. I like this thread of AR because it makes me think of like Pokemon Go, when that was really, really big. And there was another hardware company that was in Ritwik's list that I thought was kind of uh, cool, and they found a unique way to layer this in. So the company is called the company is called Sightful, and it's a screenless augmented reality product for this thing called Spacetop. and they use augmented reality and a keyboard, but it's designed for productivity. So imagine like that hardware product that Apple just built out, that you put over your eyes. I think it's called the Apple Vision Pro, but it's effectively this way where you can have a bunch of digital screens up, you can do all of your work. It's very, very productive. But what's cool about it is that they've almost built this ecosystem around it. So they're building their own apps, they're building their own version of these tools. And so not only are you taking like the interface of a traditional laptop and they've added a virtual layer into it, but there's all of these standard software products that they're building around it that I think can be really,
Yeah.
really lucrative. And so it makes me think of like, hey, if you can nail the medium somehow, like the way this hardware is being created, the software capabilities around
Yeah.
it are where like the upsells will take place.
Well, I wanted to mention like Fragile, right? Like doing
Yeah.
hardware subscriptions. Like that seems to be the way the industry has moved. So even on my Tesla, I have a modicum of upgrades, subscriptions. For example, full self-driving package, as well as premium connectivity, which is just like traffic data and being able to stream via Bluetooth, like on Spotify. So I feel like with all these hardware products, all the ones that where it talks about, they're all employing this model, right? Wherein either you're getting the hardware for free and then you pay for the subscription, then the company can amortize that over so many more years, and it can help spread out the cogs. This definitely seems to be the model. So I think when anybody thinks about hardware, it's this physical asset is the entry point into a marketplace of products. For example, with Spacetop, or it's into several different upsells and different features that people can then purchase. And I think that takes a lot of the friction away from the buying experience in the hardware market, because typically making a large investment, for example, the tennis ball machine is like $1,000, right? But for example, like with my Whoop, I bought this thing and I only have to pay $30 a month, and I didn't have to pay for the actual physical hardware. So I think it's going to make a lot of these hardware businesses more accessible to consumers who don't want to shell that upfront cash and can just cancel a subscription and return the product if they don't find it useful. So I think it's
Whoop is a
really
really
innovative.
interesting example of this. Actually, they pioneered this for the consumer space. Actually, now that I think about it, I had spoken to Will Ahmed, the guy who started Whoop, I probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the story with Whoop is it's probably one of the most successful consumer hardware products out there. They're valued at over $3 billion. And it's fascinating because it is a great example of grit. They spent 7 years building that product without monetizing it. So he had like a very, credentialed pedigree background where he had gone to Harvard, was the captain of the men's squash team, and partnered up with a few really, really talented folk. And he had 7 years of trying to building out this product, and it was all of his friends being like, why are you still working on this? Like, this thing does not make money. And he's like, just wait and see. Like, he had that level of conviction in there. But the like going ideology in the space was, or the going principle was, you pay one time for this product. And that is what competitors like Aura were doing in the space. It was like, hey, you just pay 400, $500 for this one time thing. And then you get this, tech capabilities with it for free. And he's like, you know what? Like, instead of trying to do it that way, we're just going to focus on adoption and trying to get as many people in this as possible. And so we're just going to give this to people for free. And we're
Yeah.
going to make them monetize over a monthly subscription. And he said it was a bet the company decision. They were really, really stressed out about it. And
Wow.
there was a very good chance that it didn't work out. And, it makes me wonder if that model has certainly like, there's been an element of, people are also doing the math on the back end, which is sure, it's great to get the product for free. But if you think about like your total lifetime cost around this, you're now paying, if it's $30, $360 a year, right?
Yeah.
And
And if
so
you have
like,
it
do
for
you
two
really want to
years,
pay?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you really want to pay $360 a year for this product that effectively is not really changing a
Yeah.
whole lot? So
Well,
I think that's probably something that they've had to think through. And I know there were discussions recently, I don't know if they made the price changes, but they were going to reduce the monthly price because I think people were kind of seeing their limit. That's actually a big reason as to why I churned, because I was like, $30 isn't a lot, but I don't know if I need this product telling me how bad I slept every single day. And I'm paying for it. So that was kind of like one of the challenges that I had.
Well, in many ways, this business model is a bet on the utility of a hardware product. I think most hardware companies promise the world, right? It's like this is going to be a step change in, your daily life. Like this vacuum cleaner is going to clean your floors for you and save you, an hour every week, right? So, in many ways, it's just like it takes away that friction for a consumer to have to trust this big piece of expensive hardware, and like it just opens the door. And I think it's a good thing generally. And we've seen like psychologically, right? Like look at these buy now, pay later companies. People just like spreading the cost of things over time, whether that's good financially. It actually isn't over the long term, but you have to think about how, the human brain is wired, which is, being relatively loss averse. It's funny that you mention Whoop, because I wanted to mention another product in the kind of wearable space. So it's a product that creates a headband for you while you sleep, and it's called the Halo. Wraps around your head while you sleep. I don't know how comfortable this thing would be, and I would probably look like Frankenstein in the bed, but it's an advanced neurotechnology wearable designed to induce lucid dreams. It uses ultrasound and ML models from EEG and fMRI data to detect REM sleep, and maybe does a few things to make you realize that you were dreaming. I think that product is super cool because in the bio tracking and wearable space, we've seen data, but we haven't seen like true utility, I guess, and like application. So like, yeah, the Whoop can tell me everything I'm doing, but like it can't make me do something that I'm not. So I think that's a really cool thought point to be like, how can we create hardware products that make you do something? So I personally will have a lucid dream every few months, and it's really cool and just a pretty incredible experience to be, for however many seconds, to be conscious inside this alternate reality. So I think that's another cool product. I don't know if it will work, but I could see people getting into it, and maybe a dystopian future where people prefer to dream than even be awake, and build their own ideal life. Like that could be an insane concept in,
It
50,
is a
100
wild
years.
concept.
Yeah.
It is a
Like
wild
that
concept.
that goes bigger than VR. Like sure, people are like, yeah, one day VR will be completely indistinguishable from real life. But when you go inside your brain while you're asleep, dude, that's like an entirely different animal. Like if you're someone like me, sometimes you enjoy just sleeping in because you can re-enter a dream or just like keep dreaming about random shit, and just keep your mind entertained.
That's a long-term play. I mean,
Yeah,
I could see, your typical Silicon Valley crew like really getting excited about a product like this, but I think it would take a while before you'd reach mainstream adoption.
for
But
sure.
it does make me think about like the interconnectivity of all of this. And I think for a lot of hardware products, it needs to be connected seamlessly with like the apps and tools that you're using on an everyday basis. And so, it makes me wonder like, take like a product like Whoop. They have their own app for this, but if I want to see the updates and I want to see the progress that I made, I have to open their app. I have to go click through a few different buttons to get to those level of data and insights. I would be really interested in what are ways that you can take this hardware and what you're doing and combine it with like your everyday things. So maybe instead of take like Whoop, for example, all of the data is already being put into your health app. And then that information going from the health app is also being streamlined into like any nutrition plan. Maybe you're using
Yeah.
pal, and it's now recommending like your meal plans for you and things like that. So I think the closer you can get to like two or three spaces and connecting them all together so that if you can just click one button, you get everything you need, that thing makes it way, way easier. I think going back to the point around Spacetop, that product that I was telling you about as well. So that is, a counterpoint to that because they are building their own ecosystem. And that may not necessarily integrate well with like Apple's products, right? Which already has a lot of these capabilities and they're building their own apps and stuff. And so the easier you make it, I mean, it's this typical software thing, right? Like, do you want to build custom apps or do you want to just integrate with the big players? And just make it really seamless and embed in people's workflow?
Well, forget a marketplace. What about verticalizing all the features? Who's going to do that in the fitness and biohacking space, right? Which is being the MyFitnessPal, being the Peloton, and being the Whoop, right? Like, I think that's an interesting thought point, and we've seen consolidation of features in software. Could that happen in hardware? Whoever does it is probably going to be able to make a lot of money. Um, if that could really work, or maybe it just makes sense for all these different softwares to be independent and just speak to each other better. But I think there's a huge opportunity for interoperability between these tracking platforms. On this thought point, so the two entrepreneurs who were behind Launch House, which was a really big sensation in the startup and Twitter entrepreneurship community for a while. It was, this essentially you go and live in a mansion and you get to sleep in a bunk bed and live in a crib with a bunch of other entrepreneurs and have parties and just have a great time. They ended up, they closed down Launch House. I'm pretty sure there was a scandal, but then they started this company called Superhuman, which is essentially a concierge for your health. So it'll help, a part of the membership is you pay for testing of all sorts of, your blood, blah, blah, blah. It probably connects with, a wearable of some kind for fitness. And then you have a 24/7 concierge and access to like doctors and wellness experts who can kind of point you in the right direction to kind of attack the metrics that you feel that you want to improve on the most, or that the platform identifies for you, right? So if you're struggling with your sleep health, like whether it's talking to a sleep hygienist, right, or your body fat's a little higher, talking to a nutritionist, or it could be completely like purely healthcare related if it's something related to your cholesterol levels or something. I don't know, right? But I think it's super interesting to have an all-in-one health analytics platform, wherein kind of like the
But
testing.
that is fundamentally a software play, no?
Yeah, it's a software play. He included it in the consumer roundup, but there may be a hardware element to it I'm not seeing. Maybe that's coming down the line, but I guess the thought is that it integrates with real world products. For example, they send kits for testing.
It totally could. I can see that. There was this company called Levels, and they were doing, the Whoop play, but it was around like glucose monitoring and stuff. And it was a really, really buzzy team. I think they're still operating, but there were like 6 or 7 co-founders and had incredible backgrounds. But I think that was kind of their play, was like they're going to give you, all the information and analytics around like your glucose health. But then they had this hardware product of like, real-time glucose monitoring. And I believe a lot of the technology already existed. They just wrapped it in kind of a more sleek way, and the packaging around it was really cool and unique. And I think that was a driving force for why a lot of people were willing to try their products, was because they took something that already existed. Like these glucose monitors have been around forever, and they just repackaged the entire thing.
My friend Seamus, we've covered him on the pod. He met a girl in Arizona who runs a $200 million company doing glucose monitoring, wearable product.
Unreal.
Isn't that insane?
It's crazy. I mean,
crushing it.
yeah,
They're just absolutely crushing it. Like, people want access to data they can't get through their existing compute infrastructure, like their iPhone and their computer, right? So how do you get beyond that? How do you get a layer beyond that by getting people to create, buy the product that gives them the visibility? That's just nuts. But
I would say one thing, which is when it comes to data and insights, at least in the health space, it has to be reinforcing data in a positive way. I think if you're going to go the consumer route, I don't think that, kind of going back to the example I was giving earlier, if you tell most of the people what they're doing wrong all the time, they're going to stop paying attention, and then they're just going to ignore this feedback. I think it is a small concentration of people who are actually looking to optimize every single day and would take that negative feedback that they're getting and reinforce it in a positive way. And so I think that's where, consumers are different relative to businesses, where it is their job to get negative feedback and try to optimize for every little thing.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I would say,
good point.
this is a distinction to make if you're looking to build a consumer hardware product and trying to give unique data and insights, versus if you're trying to build one for a business and an enterprise. Which is, hey, if you're offering intelligence, insights, analytic, make sure there is a positive feedback loop towards it so that the person still feels good. I'm not saying you have to blow smoke, but do so in a way that is like, hey, you're still making progress, or like shine the positive light there.
I love that point. You made the same point when we talked about personal finance apps and how most people don't manage their money well and therefore don't want to be told they're managing their money badly, because it just reinforces an anxiety they already have in their head. So it would have to be designed to be super positive, like, oh, you did this or that, or like this is going well. So I
But
completely
it's
agree
the
with that.
perfect time for it, because I think, these consumer hardware products are having their moment. This is their time to shine. And I think it's super cool, because I think, given how short form video has become like this big phenomenon for content, it is the most visual way to showcase anything. Like, I think, physical products are having their moment. There is this opportunity right now to apply a unique marketing approach to it and grow something really, really fast. And I think, take like the lens of what is happening with most CPG products, right? Like, those are very visual. There are influencers showcasing the product. And I think hardware tech is having its moment. And I think it'll stay this way, and it's only going to keep growing. And so, this is the first time where I think you can blend marketing playbooks of what has typically only worked for consumer products, or typically only for consumer software companies, and apply those to consumer hardware.
Yeah, until you get dicked by Marks Brownlee on MKBHD and have your business go bankrupt, like
Well,
Fisker.
I think they
Where
put
was
a
that wearable company that just went under? Or they didn't go under, but they got a terrible review by the guy. I think,
Yeah, and like they were trying to sell the company, but that was really flashy, right? So that was a company that raised hundreds of millions of dollars.
yeah,
I think, like, as long as you're not being like, in people's face in a provocative way, you're probably not going to catch his attention. And
yeah. Well, maybe the key is like just starting small, iterating with the product over time until it gets good enough that it can have mass adoption versus, raising a bunch of money and making it super splashy from the start and not being able to deliver on your promises, right? Which I think
well,
is a
let's
mistake.
talk about
That's the big mistake I think hardware
yeah.
companies make. If they're going to fail, it's that. Well, maybe there's the economic side, but in terms of like marketing and launch, it's like over promising, under delivering.
Well, let's talk about like the moat around like companies in the future, right? We've been pretty critical in just, I would say, the past year, especially with like how fast AI is changing on software companies and how they can build a moat unless they have, some unfair advantage around distribution or getting key customers and things of that nature. But do we feel like hardware is the way that you can now build a moat for a company? Like, most of these companies will need to have some kind of hardware element if they're really trying to stick it through for, the coming decades, if not, trying to build a really, really massive company. What do you think about that?
I think it's a great point. I was going to bring it up myself, right? Like everyone says that software is just so easy to build now, and the moat is in like media, for example, and distribution. I think with hardware, you kind of maybe get the best of both worlds in that you have to go on this crazy process and spend this time and money on developing a physical product, which is way harder than software, but it also makes it way harder for people to copy. Um, I'd say when you're building a hardware product, it's much more likely that you get copied by a massive company than another 22-year-old founder in a dorm room. And that's it comes with its own benefits and
Because
negative.
the barrier to entries are so much higher, is what you're
Right.
getting
Like if
at.
you look at Amazon, right, you get a product to rip on Amazon. They have their own internal team that's looking at what products win, and then they'll run out an Amazon Basics on your ass and put you out of business. So I think that's an interesting point. But yeah, I mean, if media is a moat as well, in addition to developing the hardware, I mean, think about all the content that you can create with a physical product versus a software product. I mean, in terms of marketing, creative marketing, and visual storytelling, you are in a different league when it comes to having tools at your disposal for getting attention and getting buy-in and getting people excited about what you're doing in the lifestyle around the product that you've built.
I agree with that statement. And I actually think that everyone has realized that, hardware has such a compelling opportunity around it. It was just missing some key pieces. We've talked about what those key pieces have been: a reoccurring subscription model, where you can get multiples that are really, really compelling, and compelling in a way that it makes sense to put up the massive CapEx required in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think, it does have its own challenges in other ways too. Like, let's take software, for example. The feedback loop is way quicker with software than it is with hardware. If, a user is complaining about a feature or a bug, you can
Yeah.
ship that out virtually overnight. For a hardware product, depending on what it is, that may be months or, a year-long
Well, did you hear
process
way
to
more
change that
stories?
up.
You hear way more stories about hardware companies that were on the brink of bankruptcy versus I feel like software companies. Like the Ring guy
Completely.
that was unable to fulfill all his orders after Shark Tank and just slaving away at like some Chinese factory trying to make this happen. Like your sales cycle and your manufacturing cycle is so challenging to navigate.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this was something that I thought was really, really interesting that I learned, which was there's almost been a very scarce amount of funding for hardware companies, and it's not only for the challenges around them, right? They're really hard, and there's few that are actually very successful. But what I learned that was interesting is that many venture capital funds, based on the way that they raise money, are not allowed to invest in hardware. And so this was something that I didn't know.
Wow, that's interesting.
It's scarce because when they went and raised their funds, there are specific clauses on what they can invest in, and for most of the people, like the where they're pulling their money from, they're actually not allowed to invest in hardware. And so even when they say they're open to saying, great products and great founders, hardware products have traditionally been at a disadvantage, just because you're talking to people who will string you along for a long time, and then when they do their diligence, they realize like they're not even able to invest.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard, right? Like, especially with like these EV companies. Like, my dad tried to build an EV startup, and it'll probably sunset soon. They're trying to pivot into software, but they really struggle. They couldn't raise any capital because VC funds don't have an automotive wing. They don't have like a deep tech. Like, many of them don't have like this deep tech wing. And I guess there are some funds that specialize in like deep tech and hardware, but it's definitely less than consumer and enterprise software.
They have to be a
And
true
healthcare.
hardware investing.
Yeah.
There's little that I don't know of many funds, if any, who can pull off the crossover. Maybe like the giant funds, your A16Zs can do that, and they probably have. But I don't think most funds are able to do that. And so just an interesting thing to keep in mind if you're looking to build a hardware product. And I think that could change. I think people are realizing just that hardware products are having their moment, and it's only going to continue to grow. And so there is a very good scenario where you start to see an increase in VC funds specifically designated to hardware investing. And you're probably going to see those in places like California, places like Austin, that already have a big manufacturing, robotics, hardware presence.
Yeah. Dude, maybe hardware is the new software. Maybe hardware is the new software. It's a super fascinating take in this episode. These business models are enabling more investment and people are warming up to it. So given the competitive nature of software and how the power and with these AI data centers and GPUs and AI companies is all kind of flowing to the top few companies who have the resources and infrastructure, maybe it is a great time to be building a hardware company, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, if you have I think if you have the aptitude for it and you're willing to endure suffering for a long period of time, I mean, look no further than Elon's book on this. And, he's a extreme example, but he was so close like that. He lived a really hard life building all three of those companies, and all of those were really, really big ideas that he was able to pull off. But I mean, it's crazy because a lot of the book is just focused on like unit economics. And he had this thing called like the idiot index, which was they were not going to pay more money than the raw cost for each good. And so they effectively built out their own. It was like, hey, if they're contracting out these parts from other people and they were significantly higher, he just would be like, screw it, we're just going to build our own. So I do think it takes a certain kind of founder to win in hardware. Again, he's an extreme example, but I think if this is at least interesting to you in some place, that's a good resource to kind of get an understanding of what is it like having built the top hardware products in the world.
Well, if you look
see if that's interesting and exciting.
If you look at, Elon Musk, the most successful entrepreneur of the modern day, the Thomas Edison of the 21st century, everything he's done is in hardware. Boring company, Neuralink. I guess you could look at OpenAI and you could look at Twitter, but like at the end of the day, this guy made his bread in creating shit that had a physical impact on the world. To wrap this up, I just spoke with a guy who runs a government contracting business, can't say his name. In some states, he's the only person that government contractors can purchase from when it comes to the materials they use for retaining walls in relation to bridges and built on highways. And he was talking about how it actually fills him with joy to see his company having a physical impact on the world. And I think a lot of people in hardware,
It's real
construction,
and it's
whatever,
tangible.
real. Yeah, it's real. It's not fugazi.
You know, one other point that I would make is that, you know, if you're trying to start out building a hardware company, focus on the upscale opportunities from the start. And so I would actually, you know, advise or suggest that you should be really strategic around the medium itself, but focus on the actual capabilities and the upsell opportunities via software. I think if there's one big takeaway, that would be it. So don't worry too much about building a hardware product that is out of this world. It can be really, really simple. Like, for example, you know, like you go to a restaurant and they have like Toast and Square and stuff like this, and they have those little hardware boxes, right? But at the end of the day, the real value is the underlying
Right.
software behind it that, you know, coordinates with Stripe and all these other like software integrations. And that feels like the right spot to be if you're just starting out and trying to build a lucrative company and in this space.
Love to see the business model saving a low margin business historically. It's a good
For sure.
well, dude, this was super fun. I love this episode. Obviously, we're not experts in hardware by any means, but you know, we can look at the trends and we can look at businesses we think are cool and talk about them. So, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Our Future Podcast. We love doing this every week. Please leave your comments and feedback below. Make sure to be subscribed and catch us next week for another episode. We should be having a new interview coming soon. I think we're gonna roll one of those out, change things up, freshen it up. So it'll be something
Totally.
cool.
And what I would say is the boys got thick skin. So if you have, you know, some critical feedback for us, keep letting us know. We're trying to make this better. I mean, I think this is one of those interesting points for the show where we're trying to determine which direction we want to take it. Of course, we want to focus on young founders. We want to talk about business strategies and insights and advice and all that stuff. But tell us what you want to hear. And, you know, maybe the answer is we're just bringing on really talented people for interviews that we have access to. And we can, you know, interview them in a unique way that other shows just aren't doing. So hit us with your ideas and hit us with all of that negative feedback. We're trying to improve this thing, and we'll catch you again next week on Our Future Podcast. Stay frosty.